and welcome to our episode of Certain to Change. Certain to Change is here to bring together some guests who have got some inspirational stories, some amazing insights, and some real ideas of knowledge around their own personal passion. And I'm absolutely enthralled to be able to introduce our first guest onto this season's episodes, being Lisa Clifford. Lisa is an international keynote speaker, a regular on BBC Radio as a guest, best-selling author, magazine columnist, and the founder of Made for More movements. And alongside that, she also teaches people and teaches trainers how to do firewalks as well. So she's kind of leading this heart-led purpose seekers feeling, going from invisible to being invincible. So let's start with that one. Being a master firewalker and making people feel invincible. Where do we start?
Well, I guess why? Why would you be a master firewalker? Why would you be a firewalking instructor at all? And it began when I would run workshops. This was about 2000, and I trained to be a coach in 2004, an NLP and a master practitioner of NLP and hypnosis. But I would run workshops and I would see people set goals, but it was almost the equivalent of when you move house and you take the boxes out of one loft and put them in the next. Like, I could see people doing that with their goals, understandably. And I thought, what can I do with them that's going to help them believe they can do anything without a shadow of a doubt? And my little mind went, you can be a firewalking instructor. Well, I didn't know any back then. And so another part of my mind said, don't be so ridiculous. Then there's another part that said you can Google it, but if you do it, you got to train with the best in the world. So I trained with. So then I researched, and there was some course you could do over a weekend. And I thought, if I'm taking people over fire, I'm not learning it over a weekend. I want a substantial course. And so I trained with Peggy Dillon, who brought firewalking over to the westernized culture from America, and then it was really brave of me to do that, for starters, but then once I'd done my first experience of leading my own firewalk and seeing people that I already knew walk over the coals and how it affected them and how something just shifted in them. Their limiting beliefs were not as limiting, they weren't blocking them. They had this new knowing about themselves, and went on to set great big goals and go for them because there was something that they'd had an embodied experience that told them who they were. So I always think that when we go to take action, our fear shows up. Doesn't always show up when we're in the planning stage, or a great deal does then, but it's for sure when we take that first step, our fear shows up and our body pulls us back. But when you've had an embodied experience like walking over fire or breaking an arrow with your throat or breaking a board or bending a rebar or walking over broken glass, all of the things that I teach, when you have that experience, your body has a knowing that still keeps moving forward, even though your brain's following it. So it's a really interesting reprogramming that it does, that it goes past the conscious thinking of which is in habit mode, isn't it? And into possibility. So once I trained in it, I then wanted to feel really like a real expert. And so I became an advanced instructor, then a master instructor, then a master trainer. And so now I teach people how to become firewalking and empowerment instructors. And it's such a gift.
Yeah.
It's such a gift.
It is. And it sounds like actually that whole process was just listening to what you were saying there almost like brought out of you as well, so that you had that initial limiting belief, who do you believe you are, becoming a firewalking instructor, that almost like embodied voice in the back of your head that kind of keeps you in that safe space, in that kind of comfort zone to stop you kind of branching out.
I absolutely did. Sorry to interrupt you. Your hand is so I can tap you as if to say pause. Sorry to interrupt. But I did think, you can't do it. You're too short. You're a woman. It's the ex-SAS guys that do it. And it was. And that's what would have kept me small. I've since done it for the army. I've done it for 100 army officers that had just come back from Afghanistan as part of their 4-day leadership program in conjunction with Sandhurst. And I was properly I use the word bricking it. 100 men that have just been on a front line, and I'm going to do a firewalk with them. I was really fearful. It was in 2011. I'd only been instructor for 3 years. And so my fears, and what I want to say is our fears do surface, but the trick is knowing that they're there. And I always think that they show up a bit like bricks. And if you get enough bricks, enough limiting beliefs, then eventually they make a bit of a wall, and it's not natural to feel like you've got to go straight through it. But when you know those limiting beliefs are just thoughts, then you're then in control. And so I think limiting beliefs do keep showing up. It's just having them in awareness that, that is just a thought. It's only fact and reality if I believe it and act upon it as truth.
Yeah, and I like that bit you said earlier about almost like that recognition. So it's the piece that when you see that limiting belief and you've kind of been through a limiting belief before, you've got that recognition there. So you then start to know what to do with that limit. You can say, I'm just going to ignore it at this point in time.
I remember it had always been my goal to be on the telly. I remember I was a little girl and I wanted to be an actress. My dad, and I was a proper daddy's girl. He couldn't leave the room without me being with it. He couldn't go to the shop without me jumping into the passenger seat of the car. And he said to me, I think I was about 9, and he said to me, he sat me on his knee, and I had this real passion for acting. And he said, you do know you'll have to sleep with the directors if you're going to be an actress. Now, I knew it wasn't okay to say, yeah, and I'm fine with it. I knew that was not the right answer. So I immediately just dismissed it as a goal and decided, right, I want to be a vet then, because I loved animals. And so that's the bit of the backstory. So then I'm in this amazing business that I've created with these amazing modalities, helping people. And I appointed a PR company to work with me. And they said, what's the goal? And I said, well, I'd love to be on telly. I want to reach a lot of people and help them believe in themselves so they can set amazing goals and live a really fulfilling life. And so I'd love to be on the telly. So I went on a diet immediately, stopped drinking immediately, because they said, when you get the call, it's that day or the next day. It's not, you don't get time to plan. You're going to be ready. So I was ready for a year. And Suzanne rang me from Approach PR, and she said, I'd done this survey in 100 businesses that what causes stress in business. And then it was published in the Yorkshire Post. Calendar had seen it and said, can we get Lisa in? So Suzanne rang me and said, Calendar, want you on tomorrow. And so this is 2000 and I think it's still 2008. So I've done all my empowerment training. I've done all my NLP. I've done my coaching. And she said, Calendar, want you on tomorrow? And I said, well, I'll give you the polite version. As I see you holding your breath. No.
Okay, that was very polite.
Yeah, the real version had 2 words. And she said to me, I'll call you back in 5 minutes. And I thought, yes, you do that, because I'm going to have a really good answer for you when you call back in 5 minutes. And in my mind, I'm saying to myself, right, you can do it in 6 months, not tomorrow, in 6 months, because in 6 months, you'll be taller, you'll be slimmer, you'll be prettier, you'll be more academic. And then I realised, oh, no, won't be. Those are just my limiting beliefs, but they'd shown up in a way that my automatic reaction was to step away. And what I was so lucky to be able to do is I have it in my consciousness that had happened. And that's what doing this training does. And so when she called back, I said, that'd be lovely. She said, good, because the car's picking you up at 10. And I had that was the most profound and most obvious time where my limiting beliefs had automatically shown up. But what was so brilliant was that I was able to see them as just thoughts and play it out and recognize that none of those things are changing and none of those things need to be in place anyway, because how tall do you need to be? And who's bothered what you look like? Obviously, brush your hair and brush your teeth. And they do your makeup anyway. But what does it? None of those things matter. Get out of your own way, because it's that information. And I always say to people, and guess who I needed to be? Because I can't be myself. That's not going to cut the mustard. So who am I going to be? And then I realised, well, you can't be anybody else. Just be yourself. And that's what they'd wanted.
Yeah.
I don't know what you asked me, but
no, I think that
I'll
kind
come
of
up for air. Come up for air.
Well, I think again, it's great because what you're kind of showing is not only how you tackled your limiting belief, but you've got so many kind of stories and experiences around this. And this is one thing I've found is it's that difference between coaching and mentoring. Because when you find a good coach, and I've been a canoeing coach for 30 odd years, and I think the bit that actually made me a good coach is because I loved and had a passion for canoeing myself. So I was able to embody that and pass it on to other people. And the same thing when it's become being a speaking coach, when it's become being a fitness and lifestyle coach. They've all been because I've been through that myself, and I can almost like challenge people's preconceived ideas. So, for example, today when I'm working with business professionals, and they turn around and say, "Oh, well, there's not enough time," and I says, "Well, I know, I've been there. I know when it does feel like there's not enough time." But you've got the same amount of time in a day as I have, and I've managed to make it work. I've been doing all those big deals. I've been working with clients all around the world. I've been jet sent, etc. And I've made it work for me. What's stopping you from making it work for you? And then all of a sudden, it disarms that kind of belief they've got. So having those kind of tales and that ability to bring that in. And I can imagine when you're working with your clients, etc., just having that ability to like inject some of those stories and those realisms, not just necessarily from your bank of stories, but actually from some of your previous clients, can really help.
Absolutely. I think people need to hear a story that they can relate to, whether it's mine or somebody else's, that makes them realize, oh, this part of the process is natural, not something to be avoided. It's actually, it's coupled up with it. Fear is coupled up with up-leveling your life or moving into an area of your life that you've never been in before. I think one of the things that I think people search for is certainty. But when you're about to do something you haven't done before, you're not going to get the certainty, but that's also part of the adventure. When we go on any adventure, we are not forecasting certainty. There's certain things we can do for ourselves. So I took a group of 10 women to Base Camp Everest just as we came out of lockdown. And I'd been before, and I'd climbed Island Peak before, so I'd gone up to 21,500 feet. And I knew it's hard enough walking at altitude. It's hard enough doing it on when you're not hungry and you don't want to eat and you haven't slept and you're cold. It's all hard enough without being fat to go with it. And I'm not referencing anybody else. I'm talking about myself. So I would get myself in the very, very best position for success. Put yourself in a good launching position. So I would eat healthily, exercise, and be as light as I could so that I could be successful. And I think that that doesn't determine certainty, because altitude is the variable factor there, that one year can affect you and another year not affect you. But the certainty in the uncertainty is ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's the bit that I have to remind people when they're going for their great big goals or a change or stopping doing something that they've been tolerating, which then allows space for something that's going to help them grow or improve or be happier, that you let go of needing certainty, embrace unfamiliarity. But in the uncertainty, the one thing that is certain is yourself. And we can be certain of how we're going to show up and how we're going to embrace challenges, how we're going to embrace blocks, how we're going to embrace our own attitude, our own saboteur. So I think that in what seems like a sea of uncertainty, holding the knowledge that I am the certainty in the uncertainty is a massive light in it all that people forget about.
Yeah, and when you start to bring this further out, and obviously I think about it from a business perspective as well, from a personal perspective, and businesses are really interesting in the fact that they are made out of people.
Yeah.
So all the same foibles that we have as our individuals, all the same greatness we have as our individuals, are actually compacted together inside an organization. So we've got those same things going on. And there's always this kind of conundrum where they're looking for so much certainty when they're kind of going through a change. that actually it can paralyze themselves, and they end up in a position. And I think IBM did a piece of work where they realized that about 76% of all projects that were started, they already knew were going to fail at the beginning. And that's a bit like, you're setting yourself up certain to fail, like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. You're certain not to survive. You wouldn't do it. It's crazy. But at the same time, this idea that there has to be such a high degree of certainty of success at the end of this kind of change, as opposed to being going through the process of exploring to work out what's going on, can paralyze organizations, because then they end up in this analysis paralysis type of place. Whereas sometimes it's better to almost like fail fast, fail often, fail cheaply, and just see what
You're really agile with it, and actually have a culture of embracing the failing, because they rip it apart and say, right, where are all our learnings, and celebrate all the learnings, right? And have that continuous improvement process, that without the failing, you're not doing your continuous, in fact, you're resting on your laurels. And I think that so often when I'm speaking to some managing directors, and I always say, if you could have any outcome that you wanted, what would that be? And then they start thinking about what their current conditions, their current team, their current process. And I said, but all that you're going to now do is forecast. You're just going to forecast an incremental growth and improvement in quality and improvement in speed if you're going to work from this existing. But you do this though, don't you? You know that, well, you can still keep all of this, maybe, but if we dismantle it and reorganize it, then you can have that. But let's get clear about what is that goal that you really want, not what you're going to forecast because of the road that you've began on, so therefore I must continue, and I've grown it from here, and it's now this beast on this particular road. So I think that just becomes forecasting rather than desire, and it doesn't become motivating either. They then realize that they're carrying this sack that they never intended to create, but now they're in it. They become ill and stressed, and I understand all of that. But what if you had the right support and you could turn it into exactly what you wanted?
Yeah, and again, this is a great parallel that you see with so many people, either with small business owners, they create a business that they don't enjoy.
Yeah.
They've kind of created a culture, they've created something actually that is, the idea at the initial part was great, but actually the execution of it has meant they're living in the space where they just don't enjoy what they've developed. And then how do they get out of that?
Exactly. And also people that say, I want so many people working for me. Why? And it sometimes, usually, not always, turns out because really underneath it all, they're proving to an ex-boss that didn't value them, that marginalized them out of the business, or didn't appreciate them. In some way, it's proving to them, I made it. But do you want a business with 10 people in, 15 people in, where your job is then to feed them? And can you give the service and the delivery that you love giving in the way that you love to give it with 10, 15 people? Have you suddenly become an administrator of 10, 15 people? It completely changes everything, doesn't it? But when you get under, why do you want 10, 15 people? And usually it's to prove something to somebody, but it's not because they're going to enjoy that machine or that animal.
Yeah.
Do you find that?
Yeah, and it always comes back down to then identifying what's the reason for change, what's the reason why you're doing something, and sometimes those little things that are subconsciously under there. But from a business perspective, I just ask 3 really simple questions. How's it going to make you money? How's it going to save you money? And how's it going to keep you out of jail? And if you can answer those 3 questions, then it's worthwhile. It helps root out some of those kind of pet projects or those things where it's like almost like an ambitious thing.
Yeah.
And it's not saying there's nothing wrong with actually doing that, if that's really what you're using this vehicle to do. But it's being conscious that that's what you're doing, as opposed to being unconscious about it sometimes. And
getting back to somebody's purpose, a company's purpose. I coached a company that made passive housing, and they're a big company now. But we worked really a lot at the beginning on what's your purpose. And then every decision they make calibrates back to that. So it's a tangible purpose. If our offices that we're about to build, I remember the construction director saying it'd be cheaper and faster to make it out of concrete. And I said, but is that in alignment with the purpose of this business? And so bringing it continually back to the purpose helps make all the decisions that go down the line, even to how often people travel to one of the sites. And we did it in a workshop where we realised that people were jumping in their car and going and do meetings in Sheffield, and they'd be like backwards and forwards each day, each week, and their sustainability footprint was not in alignment with their purpose. And so as a brainstorm, they all brainstormed it and came up with what would all the objections be. So they said, well, why don't we go 1 day a week, all of us, and car share? So that would help with this. But the council will want to tell us the day they want to meet us, and architects can't do that. Well, what if you tried it first? What if you shared with them, this is what we do, this is how we work, can you support our mission that you are already part of as a partner? And then it became something that, it just worked like clockwork. Everything slot into place. All the meetings were done on one day. There was 3 cars that would go full of people on the one day, rather than backwards and forwards. And it created less stress for everybody. It made them much more streamline who they saw, when they saw, getting decisions, and the team spirit in the cars as well. But that all came from what's the purpose?
Yeah.
And then the values for the business that honoured that purpose. The values are a bit like the machine that aligns with the purpose, that enables the purpose to be living. And so it just makes total sense to do it that way. But you have to recruit for that culture as well.
Yeah. And it's interesting, we kind of, you almost explained there that there was almost this reluctance to even express that. And that comes back to what you were saying earlier with regards to that fear factor, that kind of underlying limiting belief, I think. So when someone's kind of got an underlying limiting belief that actually, no, it's never going to happen, they might never even explore that as an option.
Yeah, because they've just made an assumption that belief is fact. So there's no point. It's banked. It's a fact. And I think that's what we need to do is sift them to the surface, which is what the Firewalk is amazing for. Because if you have a component in a training course or a workshop that brings people's fear to the surface, now I've got to be very... I've got to have a high tolerance for holding people's fear. So I've got to be unflappable, but that's my job, is to bring people's fear to the surface for them to see it, to know what it is. Like mine, I'm not sure, I'm too short, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not clever enough, I'm not academic enough. What if people laugh at me? Those all came to the surface because there was a component that brought it up. So I always bring that up in a workshop. And then when they see what theirs is, then when they show up again in the future, they can just dismantle them like that brick wall that isn't cemented together and isn't in front of them, in them. And then they can make a choice over the thoughts that they have. But you have to have a mechanism, I think, that brings them up in a way that they really relate to, rather than talk about it conceptually.
And it's interesting you do bring up about that role as the facilitator of that, because it is... When people are going through changes, then their identity changes. It brings up lots of kind of limiting beliefs. It brings up lots of things from their earlier years, their formative years, potentially. And some of these can be right deep-rooted or even incredibly emotional or distressing or actually have bursts of anger and all sorts of things. So as the facilitator in that kind of scenario, of any kind of change scenario, you've got to almost be prepared and ready for them and be available to manage that situation, but also then not taking it too personally, so you can help manage yourself, so you're not taking it on board all the time. And I can imagine that's an interesting dichotomy to try and tread when you're doing things like a firewalk.
Yeah, I think what I do is allow people to have their experience and not to make it good or bad. It just is, and stuff. This process is designed to bring it up from unconscious navigation into consciousness and then out. And sometimes that isn't pretty, and it is messy, but it just is, and it needs to happen. And so I don't try and control people in a way of, right, don't cry, Martin. And I don't let other people do that in workshops either. If somebody's processing something, I say, let them do it, let them be in their power and do it. The minute we reassure them, put the hand on, first of all, we're anchoring that state in, as you know. And the other thing is we're saying, it's almost like pushing it down back into them. and that we become what's the word? We start to conform with, oh no, I mustn't be a nuisance, I mustn't take up much space, I don't want people to be worried about me, and we start to minimize ourselves again. So it's a brilliant lesson in all of that about leave people alone. Whatever they're going through isn't good or bad, it just is. Let them go through it, let them be in the power in it, because very rarely do people get space in a group to process something without them being over considerate to people around them. And meanwhile, whilst the person's doing this, they're putting themselves in a rescue. They're playing out one of the characters they've given themselves as rescuer, or I'm more superior, or I'm the nurse, or I console people, or and they're out of their own experience. So I try and keep everybody in their own experience. But when I get off on my firewalks, when people come on them, they've chosen to come on them. They've actually come because they want to release the stuff that they're unconsciously holding back, and it gives them space to do it in and time to do it that they don't get outside that opportunity. When I do it for a company, they don't know they're walking on fire. So the decision maker knows.
I can just imagine that. Just going to turn up with several tons of fiery coals. I'm just going to spread them in your car park. Don't worry about this.
Yeah.
We'll clear.
So I don't tell the group. And I also, it's really bad for my own marketing, but I also don't tell your team my name, because if they Google me, then they're going to see what we do. And what's going to happen is their fear, their own structure of thinking towards something like this is going to come up. It's going to be reinforced, and they're going to be even more resistant because they want free choice. So just don't tell them. I'm going to take them on a journey. Just tell them it's a personal development day, and I'm going to take them through a process that expands their idea of what's possible. It expands their own idea of their own potential. It expands their belief system. And then when we've expanded it, then I'll say, do you want to walk on fire next? And they are up for it. Now, every time I go into a company and run my one day Be Unstoppable day, and I have to say to them, we're not walking on fire today. I want to reassure you. And then we go through some other exercises that are very exciting. So the arrow break, the glass walk, the rebar bend, they're really powerful because they've got lots of purpose in them, and people are working through their own stuff through these processes. And at the end, every single one of them says, oh, we're really not walking on fire. I would love to walk on fire now. And they're ready for it. Yeah. But at the beginning, they're like, oh, thank goodness we're not walking on fire. At the end, they really wish we were. In fact, a company that I used to do their talent program, I would do the behavior profiling part, and I would do the mindset part and the Be Unstoppable stuff. And they eventually built in the firewalk, because when they came to do their graduation presentations to the board, they all said, we really wish we'd been able to firewalk. And so then it got built in, but sadly the company went into receivership.
Oh dear. Obviously nothing to do with the firewalk.
Nothing to do with me or everybody leave. No, they didn't. But they tapped into in those workshops, because they don't have a character to play in those, because everybody's equal. They're all being themselves. They tap into a vulnerability that feels so refreshing for them, and it's so acceptable. And because I have this no touch rule.
Sounds like most businesses these days, to be honest with you.
Oh, is it? Yeah. I insist on hugging everybody, but because I have this, that people feel that they can express what they're feeling, and therefore they do have profound shifts, but they also have brilliant light bulb moments. And even the ones that are parents understand how their programming is affecting their kids' belief system.
Oh, massively, definitely. And I think that was the interesting thing about looking at how you approach firewalks versus some of the other firewalkers in the industry. You kind of do give that bigger space for people. You facilitate it. You've got that controls around it. And the firewalk is almost like the incidental element of it, as opposed to actually being the focal element of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I make sure that people are connected with the purpose of why they would want to walk on fire, not, I'm going to teach you a technique, now you walk damn fast over those calls. I don't teach people how to walk over fire. There isn't a, are you ready? Yes, 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 go. There's none of that.
Yeah.
It is where people can hold their goal, their purpose in a really powerful way within them, that it raises their vibration to match the vibration of the fire, so that when they walk over with purpose and intention towards their goal. But there's a load of work done before then, but it's all the work about them. And I know other instructors run a seminar where you listen to a speaker at the front, everybody's sat in rows, and you listen, you sat with your coat on, and then you go out and walk on the fire and you go over once. Mine's a whole experience of embodying who you are, what you want, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what do you want to let go of, what do you want to step into, what is now the time for. And so and we work a lot with the fire. So when they come to walk over the fire, that's not separate to them, it's part of them. And I think that's a brilliant model for goal setting, because too often when we see something as separate, that's where injury comes in. It's where we become complacent, transactional, and we're not connected. But it's that connection, I think, that allows for magical results.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and again, this is one of the things when I'm working with my clients is it's almost getting them to build those layers up. So for example, in a business, you have the same type of thing. You have vision and mission, goals, objectives, drivers, all those kind of things. And you almost know that from business theory. That's what you have to do. And it's the going through that process of creating them and extracting them and then building on them. So you almost create that golden thread from what is really the purpose and the intention of this organization right way through to each and every single action that's performed. And when you see that done correctly and with the right organizations, they can absolutely move mountains.
Well, they're like athletes.
Yeah.
They have an athletic mind that embraces challenge and change. They actually show up. I mean, when I worked with a different construction company, they asked me to bring in a sports team culture. Mm-hmm. So I recruited in a way that you would for sports people. They had an experiential interview that wasn't an interview, but I got to see, will they fit in the culture? So we created the culture. I created a recruitment process, and we wanted people that owned up to not getting something. I didn't want anybody that defended their position. I wanted somebody that went, oh yes, I did that, or I learned that. I wanted people that bared their soul a bit as well. So I did, so you've got to recruit for it. But when you get a team like that together, then we would have meetings standing up. We'd work to the clock, not the calendar. Mm-hmm. You know that in lean thinking. And, but we operated that way. What's the intention before we do this meeting, mm-hmm. right? Let's hold that intention. What would it look like if we've achieved it? Let's get aligned with that. If you have no part in this meeting, you're not in it, we'd hold them standing up. On time is late, 5-2. Everybody had an active role. Most of what we did was on our feet, but that's what a sports team would be like. You're having the briefing, you'd be on your feet, and a debrief afterwards. And did we achieve our intention? What was it? It's written down. Did we achieve that?
Yeah, and it's interesting with that. Again, there's the two different types of mindset in the organizations. You've got those that you need to have that big change mindset, and they need to be able to look at the goals the organization's going towards and which kind of direction they're kind of moving in, and have that kind of element of taking the control, taking the business in that direction. Whereas the other side that you need inside organizations is that stability, yes. It's that grounding piece.
Yes.
Where actually they're more worried about the drivers of the organization, what's actually holding it back, what's causing the concerns, what's the things that they need to do for the statutory. And then there are two completely different mindsets. And if you get the balance wrong in an organization, you can either anchor it in one place where it's never going to change. And in fact, what will happen is it atrophies over time. Or you end up in a position where it's constantly changing. It's so chaotic that there is no stability in the organisation. It becomes so unstable that
it appears erratic as well. Yeah. We would, so I would profile the roles and profile for the team, and then recruit for the profile, and then so we would know. So we use DISC profiling because it's and the reason why I like DISC is because not only do you learn about yourself, but you can profile the other person, and then you speak in a language that they understand so that you're understood. Mm-hmm. So I would teach the behaviour profiling so the team understood each other and used, it was their responsibility to flex into the other person's language and give them information in the way that they wanted, and vice versa. So it means that everybody's doing it. But when we would have a culture initial group session for recruitment, so I would initially assess for culture, but where they were experiencing our culture, so they could say, look, this is true, this is what we do, so either you're going to love this or you don't. But again, they didn't know that's what the interview was going to be like. And recruitment companies wanted to know what the interview was going to be like so they could prepare their candidate. And I'd have to like really plead on their better nature, please don't, because we want to see them. I want to see the heart of them. At this point, we've looked at their minimum criteria on the CV. They meet that. At this point, I want to know, are they going to enjoy working for us? Because we don't want people that don't know what they're getting into. And then we would then profile those candidates that did pass that process. And then they would have to be in alignment with the profile we needed, for the job and for the team. And then once they'd got through the profile process, then they came and did a skills-based experience so that they knew what the job was going to be like. So they had some confidence in that, and we knew where their level was at, but there would always be a score. And then after that, they came and spent a day or half a day. So that it's getting these right mindsets, these right people with the right ambition or the right level ambition, because having no ambition is also okay. And they would come and spend the day with us, and they also got to see exactly what it was like to work with us. What's the team like? What's the flow like? What the office is like? And then there would be key people for that particular role that they'd be interacting with. They'd have a schedule. I created this process myself. There'd be a schedule that they had to mark the person on. We'd all get together in a room. We'd give our marks, and they had to score over a certain score, which they'd all decided in advance this would be the criteria. And that's how people got recruited. The team chose the candidates. And so what happened then is when the candidate got the job and came to join, the team were happy because they'd chosen that person and they'd had a measurement in which to do it. It wasn't just like, I like Martin. He's got nice twinkly eyes and that cup of tea you made was cracking. I can live with that. It was as well as taking some ownership over them, it was measured. And everybody takes responsibility for them, rather than managing directors recruited them. I didn't think he'd ever work out. I don't think he's going to work out. Well, let's just see how long he lasts. Yeah. Well, that person's never going to succeed. I don't know what you asked me, but I went there.
It worked. I'm happy with that. The one thing I'm trying not to do is go down some of the disaster. We've all got disastrous kind of stories from recruitment processes, so I'm going to park that one, I think.
Oh, we'll talk off air.
Yeah, definitely. We've got some. So anyway, let's not go to PTSD. Let's go to something back. So again, we kind of went down the direction of talking about from a business perspective, which is great. But actually bringing it back to now the personal perspective. So obviously businesses have got missions, visions, goal drivers, objectives, etc. We talked about golden threads and stuff. But actually all this kind of stuff is useful in personal lives. And I think you were hinting at that same type of thing as well, where people can suddenly have that kind of mission. So for example, your mission now, which is all around, helping people go from invisible to invincible, which is a fabulous mission, by the way. How does that kind of help people with their own personal performance and how they can actually then change?
Oh, massively. I think the work I do helps people see where they're playing small, smaller than they want to be, not just small compared to where they could be, but where they're holding themselves back. And if they weren't holding themselves back, what would they want? If anything was possible, what would they want? And then that needs courage, does that question. Because once you know the answer, and that's why it's always really good to do it with a coach, because we're like, yes, tell us more, and what else? Because they won't go that far with themselves. We like to think we will, but we don't. It's fabulous to have a coach sit there and say, right, tell me everything else that's in your head. It's so self-indulgent. I love it. So tell me that full picture. Tell me how it plays out in your life. Tell me who you be in. Tell me what aspects of yourself that you're no longer having to limit. Tell me the parts of you that get to come alive. How long do you think that you've wanted that for? Was it something you wanted when you were kids? So getting them to be really clear on what they'd love if there were no limits. And then once they've accessed that in their mind and in their heart, because they feel like they've lived it by the time they've,
Yeah.
well, whilst we've held space for them as they go through it, and we're just listening without limitation. And that's different to sharing it with a friend. Because how many people do you work with that say, well, I did have this goal, but my friends have talked me out of it because it's ridiculous. It's not the right time of year. You need money to do it. And so many people fail doing it. And that's what our friends do out of kindness, because they don't want us to fail. But really, that goal never really got to breathe and to be decided upon. So it does take courage. And the courage comes from daring to say everything that's in your mind, in case it sounds stupid and it's probably not seen the light of day before. But once you know it, you can't unknow that is in your heart. Yeah. And you have to live with that awareness. And then you've got this, your current reality, which might be okay. Be okay, but you might be playing way smaller than this. And I think that's where the courage comes in, because that also might seem so big and so far away that it's impossible. And then people's minds go to, but how? They immediately, normally what people do is set a goal as a one-line sentence and then go straight to the how.
Yeah.
Talk themselves into it being unfeasible, impossible. It's never going to happen, because they don't have the current knowledge of the how, and then rule it out. And I think that's what's brilliant about having goals that don't think any idea is stupid. We think if you've thought it in here and you've managed to interpret it up here, then you're meant to be doing it. Now we've got to get you aligned with it rather than just affirming it. You have to take some action. And so, holding them in the vision, which is where the motivation is, and making sure they don't shrink that. Mm-hmm. And then also them going through some sort of mindset experience, and even an embodied experience where they've feel like they've experienced it, so therefore it's inevitable. So that's how it goes from taking people from feeling invisible to invincible. And then how it plays out in their life is they then start having conversations that are being putting off, or expressing themselves in a way that's more true to themselves, still being graceful and dignified in it, but still no longer going along with things they don't want to do. Daring to say to their boss, I really want that job, and their boss thinking, about time.
Yes.
So much of that thinking, I could see your potential, but you had to wake up to it. So it's not that people leave companies, it's that people grow up in companies once they have access to a coach that believes in what they can see.
And it's interesting, you kind of hit on that piece of some people always just ask the basic questions, and they'll take the answer that someone gives them as being true. And I always remember the old consultant technique is you always ask why 5 times.
Yeah,
anytime because whenever a business is trying to do something, why are you trying to do that? Why did that happen? What's the result? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And eventually, and after 5 whys, you do tend to get to the core of what's actually going on there. And especially with people, if you ask why is that important? Why do you need to get that done? And eventually you do get to the reality of not the superficial answer that they think everybody wants to hear, or the polite answer that they think society should hear, or not the kind of answer that they think the mum should hear. It's actually the real
not
answer.
The marketable answer, because that's what people tend to give, isn't it? The answer that could go on a brochure. And sometimes they even say it like that.
Yeah, definitely. And so many people's goals and aspirations are based exactly on those, as opposed to being actually what's truly in their heart, what they truly want.
Yeah. We can feel that, though, when you're with a good coach that's probably walked your path or coached many people and really wants to see success. We can feel when somebody's answer, not only do we know from experience, but we can feel it in we've taken in everything. We know what they look like when they're telling the truth. Mm-hmm. And then the reason why I say we can feel it, I've made it sound a bit woolly, but there's something that gets triggered within us, say something changed and this became an untruth in what I'm seeing, either their tone, the colour, how they're breathing when they're saying it, which way they're looking. But unconsciously, we know that's an untruth. It's not like they're deliberately lying, but they slipped into an answer that they feel they should give, rather than like there's a right and wrong answer.
Yeah, it's like the polite and conditioned way of saying something, as opposed to being actually the real way.
Yeah, and that's why you have to work with a coach that is going to really see you, not just give you the 50-minute hour.
Yeah.
And somebody that's been around a while, that has no investment in or attachment in your success for themselves. They just want what you want for you. And so they can work for your highest good. And not be afraid as well to say, no, you need to come, you need to tell me that's not the answer. So go on. I'm holding you whilst we're going through this. Let's go a bit deeper, because that's not your answer. I know you think it is, but trust me, there's one more. So even when they go, no, I don't think there is any more. And then we've got to be unflappable and sit there quietly until they've removed that little bit of resistance of their own fear of what they might discover is the answer. And then allow that to breathe, but that being firm and not seeing them as a friend, but seeing them as somebody, I'm here for your highest good. And I'm going to try and do this in a way that unlocks it for you in the easiest way possible. But sometimes that unlocking might need a crowbar.
Yes.
Sometimes we do have the skeleton key, and sometimes we just need to give it a shimmy, and then everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Do you ever have that though, where you've tried the skeleton key and it doesn't fit that lock because it's been locked for a while?
Again, this comes back to, I think you kind of hit the nail when you said experienced coach. I think that's the kind of one of the biggest differences. Because when you've kind of gone through and you're learning the tools, and that's where everyone has to start, right? You have to learn somewhere. It's great. You've got this kind of great toolkit of things, and it's a bit like, for example, when you're going to start doing a project on your house. If you're into DIY, you'll have your screwdrivers, your spanners, your hammers, etc. And you can use any of these for doing the job at hand. But if you're trying to put a nail in a wall using a spanner, it's going to take you a lot longer and be a lot less accurate than using the hammer. Yeah. But until you've kind of experienced that and know that, it doesn't come off flow naturally. So having that experienced coach who knows to try different tools, that knows that different people respond in different ways, and sometimes it takes a little bit exploring, or even for the coach or the mentor themselves to be able to actually recognize what it is that someone's doing. Some people are incredibly good at masking effectively what they are and how they respond to things. And they've done it for so long, the kid themselves as well as trying to kid the rest of the world.
And I think that masking comes from some sort of preservation, does it? Preservation and what is it they're preserving? What is it they don't want somebody to know about them? And perhaps even that coming out to light, up into light, could be enormously a relief for them and freeing and liberating. But it's that recognizing that this isn't really who you are. And I know that because I remember a client, actually, because I harmonize with somebody naturally. And have you done hypnosis?
I've been hypnotized. I've never been trained.
Oh, you've not been trained as one. So part of what we do...
Do not turn me into a chicken.
And, well, I don't know if you've noticed that you've emptied your bank account to me already. I'm more interested. I've got all. So one of the things that we naturally do, and we probably naturally do this as rapport builders anyway, is unconsciously we would align our breathing. And in hypnosis, what you want to do is you match a mirror and then lead, because you want your person to be relaxed. You want them to have a great experience. So one of the things I unconsciously do with people, I don't even try to do it, is I'm breathing with them. And there was one lady once, and I said to her, "You're not breathing." She said, "Oh no, I forget to breathe sometimes." She said, "How do you know?" And I said, "Because I've been holding my breath." And I'm thinking, why am I holding my breath? And it's because I'd harmonized with her. And I think that's where we start to learn about when we notice something isn't quite right for somebody, and maybe they don't even know it's not right for them. They really need us to be embodying the work of coaching and wanting them to be in their peak performance. And so that comes from that, us trusting our own unconscious understanding and then using it with them, and then feeling safe that actually anything that Martin says to me, I'm going to accept. I feel safe. I feel like I know that he's not got any other agenda. He just wants me to be brilliant. So when he says it, I feel like I can trust it. And I think you really only get that because somebody feels it when they're with you. They know when they're in the seat of an experienced change maker, life transformer. There's just something about them, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. And I think when you find those kind of people that you kind of gel with, that you almost see them and you see what they've been able to achieve. They've almost got that credibility, that back catalogue, etc. However you kind of bring it to light, it just creates that credibility and that rapport, and that kind of helps you. And again, businesses rely on this a hell of a lot. That's why you do things like testimonials and case studies, etc. And it's a similar kind of way of being able to bring that kind of same credibility to the table. But finding that and building that almost from ground zero is very much challenging. So being able to do that, again, coming back to your firewalking and how you do your setups on an evening for people, and creating that space where you've got to kind of build rapport in a very short amount of time, build a lot of trust for people then to be able to open up themselves.
And they're nervous. They're really nervous. In fact, they can't even quite believe that they've put themselves on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's that me holding their fear so that they can move through it whilst not being rattled myself. And I tell you, one of the things that that really helped me with that, Lisa Nichols, who's in The Secret, I'm sure you know of, I once saw one of her very short clips, and she said when she's speaking, there's a couple of things that she said. One of them is when she's speaking, there's 4 things she doesn't do. She doesn't prove, defend, protect, or expect. Even just saying it, there's like this ease, and you just think, right, well, I'm just free.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make anybody think a different way. I'm here. If they want to eat from the buffet, they can. I'm here, and I'm either going to be somebody's cup of tea or not, but I can't do anything about that. And the other thing she says, if you want them to put skin in the game, put your skin in the game first. But I always want to add to that is don't make it a carnivore meal by you putting all, that this happened to me and this happened to me and this happened to me and this happened to me. Like my backdrop story, my story is it's really quite tragic. And it's important that people know it, but it doesn't need to take up the hour. And I tell it in a way that they don't know I'm talking about me, and I tell it in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And the moment that story is landed in a way that isn't self-absorbed, they suddenly think they have so much, sorry, everybody's ears. They have so much respect for all the components of what we're about to do that suddenly I make more sense than being another empowerment instructor that's almost got that body filled with ego. And so, I love those components of not trying to prove, defend, protect, or expect, and giving a little bit of yourself, but they don't need to know flipping everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about building trust. You've got to show, that you're first, your faults, your foibles, all those kind of things that you've been through. So you come across as being human at the end of the day.
And you're right, it is about building trust, but not giving reassurance.
Yes.
Because my psychology around that is the reassurance is disempowering, and I'm there to teach them empowerment. I'm there for them to stand in their fear and then still move and do a really powerful thing with it. Reassurance takes them out of their empowerment, and I take responsibility for their experience because I'm saying, you'll be all right. I don't know what they're thinking. What they're thinking will determine what their experience is, and they get to see that and feel that in black and white. So it's really important. I have a team and I say, do not reassure them. Do not tell them what we're doing. Don't you get uncomfortable with their discomfort. It is part of the evening.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. So I think we've gone through it.
What day is it?
Yeah,
is it still Friday?
Still Friday. Definitely Friday. So if you guys
I could go run a marathon now.
Yeah, if you guys listen to this on a Monday, we recorded on a Friday. And if you listen to it on a Sunday, we're still recording on a Friday. But I think let's pull things together and kind of wrap them up a little bit. So if you were going to give everyone who's listening 3 kind of key actions, 3 things that they could do today that's going to really move them into their space of power, what would they be?
Okay. Well, I think I've covered quite thoroughly conscious thinking. So knowing that we have 60,000 thoughts a day, of which 80% of those are negative thoughts and 95% of those negative thoughts are repeated negative thoughts, I'd start with those. I'd start with noticing your pattern of thinking and make it conscious, because that pattern of thinking is you can do lots of other positive stuff, but if you're got that pattern of thinking, you're really working against some resistance. So bring your pattern of negative repeated thoughts into consciousness, and then you choose. Once they're in consciousness, you're always in choice. You're never in default. Second thing is focus on what you do want, not what you don't want.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
And the third thing would be visualize, 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 visualize. Put yourself in the visualization of it going exactly the way you want it to go, not how you forecast it to go. That's two different things. So if you imagine that you're speaking on the stage, see yourself speaking on the stage, your shoulders back, a smile on your face, you laughing with the audience, them laughing back, or them in thought, that you're moving in a way that looks like you in your most natural, confident ability, that you're just being yourself. See that. See a standing ovation at the end. See a queue of people. What people tend to do sometimes is like they just see themselves getting through it. Don't visualize the minimum of what you want for yourself. Visualize the best of what you want for yourself. So that's bring your unconscious repeated negative thoughts into consciousness and choose them. Second one is think about what you do want, not what you don't want, and then visualize your best goal as though you're in the success of it.
Absolutely fantastic. And I think I'm going to bring a fourth one in.
Yeah.
Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite them to work with you, obviously, at some point in time. So, let them know a little bit more about how they could join in a firewalk, or maybe it's something that they want to organise for their business, effectively.
Well, yes, it's a brilliant experience for companies that their team will never be the same again, because they can't unknow how powerful they really are. And they'll want to spend that. They'll want to spend that energy, that knowing, that possibility in the business. And also I teach people to become Firewalking Empowerment Instructor. So they get to add that to their training company, where they can take their training company, which is probably a classroom, into a much more experiential, powerful experience for their groups. And firewalking and empowerment training is being considered to be the most powerful training there is on the planet. So I've got a course on the 28th of February 2025 is the next one, but you could be listening to this at any time. So it'll be the next one on the website.
So just want to let everyone know the website and
lisaclifford.co.uk.
Perfect. That's really easy. You're going to find the link to that in the blurb. That was going to be around this video at some point, depending on whether you're watching it on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, wherever else it's going to end up on. Apple, that's the other big one, isn't it?
That's the other one.
And we'll probably also post links to it on the socials as well. So you'll be able to link to there and link directly through to Lisa and find out a lot more about what she does, how she does it, etc. And if you feel like this episode has really kind of changed your mindset already and you want to explore that a bit further, I do recommend, get in touch with Lisa, have those kind of conversations. She's an amazing lady to speak to. I'm really considered quite grateful to be able to have you here on the show as the first of our podcast guests for the Certain to Change series. And it's been great to share the experience of writing a book with you as well.
Oh, yes, of course. We're in the Catalyst of Change book. Oh, thank you so much for having me. I mean, I'm guessing that your next guest will be sat further apart, since I have touched you so much during this interview. But I've loved it. Thank you, darling, so much.
Fantastic. Okay, as always, then, have an absolutely super amazing time ahead and look forward to speaking to you all later. All right, bye-bye for now.
Bye.